Hello, hello everybody. I thought I'd make another movie to go along with our book and our second week of class. First week of class, I guess. We're still just on our first one. This summer goes so fast, and in Orange City we have the Tulip Festival right after graduation, so there's a lot going on in town. And yeah, it's just a busy time of year after the school year ends. So anyway, I want to mention a couple of practical things, and then I'd like to talk a little bit more about True Diary, Alexie's novel that we're reading. So first off, I posted a second discussion question, and I'll show it to you here. It's here under our discussions. So thank you for all of your posts on this first one. I graded everything. I commented on some of them. I don't comment on everything, and I use those comments just to encourage you or just say things that I want to say. But anyway, overall, great job on this. So I stuck a second one in here, and I'll do this sometimes. These are not graded, so if you don't have time, that's okay. You do not have to post here on these optional ones. But the thing is, with an online class, there's not a lot of time to, interact. So this is the place to do that. So if I say something in one of my videos or on one of the assignments, or the just general lecture content, and you want to say something, agree, disagree, pose a question, you've got a question unrelated to my video, please, and this can be among you folk. It doesn't have to necessarily involve me. It doesn't have to be, a back and forth between me and some of you. It could be, like the kind of thing that go on in class, right? So we're trying to recreate that online. So I'll always have a discussion forum open there where you can say what's on your mind. All right, so the next thing I'd like to do is say a few things about the book. So as I noted, the discussion questions are graded. All of the material you need there for the essay that's due on Sunday night is all there. So if you have questions, again, email me, especially since this is our first time around. If you've got questions, I always respond quickly to email. But do read through all those materials. There's a lot of explanation there, and what I hope are clear instructions and criteria by which I evaluate the essays, and an example essay with lots of notes. Let me quick go back to the discussion forums a sec, though. It's just remembering here there was something I wanted to show you. So on these forums, let's see. Right, so some of you are posting with full text, and others are just clipping a document to it. And there's not really a wrong way to do this. I mean, either way is fine if you want to attach a Word document. This makes it easier. The Word document makes it easier for me to comment on it, but I don't do a lot of commenting on the discussion forums. I will on the essays. The essays have to come in as Word documents. But for these discussion forums, if you want to just stick it here, or so you just cut and paste. I don't, maybe both is the best way to do it, so that I can comment on them if I want. And the advantage here is that you can see it more easily, right? You just pop open the forum and you can read everybody's stuff right off the bat. And some folks are responding to others, which is great. It's not a requirement. I'm not making that part of the grade, but it's always nice to say a little, hey, how do you do? And say something, related. And I don't expect to have any issues or problems here, but because the subject matter isn't necessarily controversial or difficult in a political way or anything, but let's always be, just be respectful. And this is a great example of that. Just say, hey, and be, positive and gentle and respectful if you want to disagree with something. So all that's optional, but it's a nice way to build a little class space unity. I don't know what you call it when it's not a classroom. It's a virtual classroom. That's what we'll call it. Okay. It's wild for me. I mean, I've taught online a little bit with COVID, but this is a new thing for me, not seeing your faces. So anyway, thanks. And pop a document in there, a Word document, and just cut and paste here. So that's all good. All right. Hope you like this. I mean, that's not my point that you like, school, right? You have to read it. But I chose this because it, well, a lot of you said, right, just as I expected, probably you had, pretty good reading experience as a kid. A lot of people have a good reading experience as a kid, young person. So like, when you're in elementary school, that's typical. It's one of the reasons you're probably in college or taking college courses, because you had a really good, foundation in language. That's one of the fundamentals of education, as you know. So the problem, though, is as adolescents, we get busy in sports and we get online, and that's increasingly the case for the little kids too with this next generation. So, and then we lose our connection with reading, and it's partly why I wanted you to read a really good YA, young adult lit book, so that you maybe discover what you missed as an adolescent. I know some of you said, right, that you read a lot of, Harry Potter and Rick Riordan and all the good stuff for adolescents, but some of us didn't, right? We got going with basketball practice or, you name it, and friends and online stuff, right? And then we just didn't read. So I don't know what you think. Is this one for adolescents? I mean, it's about adolescents and it's marketed as YA, but one of the interesting conversations around the book is like, who's it for, right? Because I'll bet you're thinking, would I show this to a 14-year-old, right? Because we got a 14-year-old protagonist. And should 14-year-olds read this? And I'd be curious to hear what you all think about that. You want to drop in on the forum there. And would you hand this to a bunch of 8th graders? Well, some of you are like thinking about teaching or teachers, and like your 8th grade classroom, would you put this in front of them? And if so, how? Because if you like search it online, this is one of the most banned books, we still ban books. School boards get angry letters from parents. It's like, why would you share this book with my young daughter or son? So I'm curious what you think about that. I myself, I have 2 boys. They are older now. They're in, let's see, one just graduated from Northwestern, so that's cool. So he's ready to go. He's going to go to graduate school in mathematics, of all things. I really failed there. Got a PhD in English and literature, and my own son, my own flesh and blood, is becoming a mathematician. So I can't believe it. I don't know where he gets it. His mom. And then I've got a younger boy. He is he's going to be a sophomore at Northwestern, and he's majoring in ecology, and he loves science. So again, I guess my kids didn't become literature people, but maybe that's a good thing. There are more jobs in math and science than in the humanities, so maybe that's good. Anyway, reading well at all ages and encouraging people to read complex stories well is fundamental to, our educational development. And that's why you might be asking yourself, I don't know, we've got some, let's see, nursing majors and computer science majors and variety of people in our class. And you might be wondering, why do we require literature of everybody? Why don't we require like coding, C++, or I don't know, like nursing fundamentals, right? Why do we require certain subjects and not others? And that's, largely because over the millennia, we've learned as humans that language, you really can't do very much without language. And if you want to be an educated Christian, and educated, everybody, but especially, I think it's especially important for Christians, and I'll say more about that in a minute. You need to read well. And you need to understand other people's stories. And I think this book is a really good example of that. It's raw, it's rough, it's the real deal about 8th grade and high school. And I don't know, some of you probably had nice experiences and good people and good behavior, but I imagine you don't have to go too far away to understand junior high and high school, or it's rough. It's a rough set of years, right? And I think of all the changes, just biological, psychological, and then just the social reality of schooling in the United States. It's something to write a good book about. Because I don't know if you know much about Native Americans, or if you folks have any personal connections there. Sometimes I do, sometimes in classes I've had, let's see, over my 30 years of teaching, I've had 2 students, so very few, but that's the nature of where I've taught, who've come from reservations. One was from up north in Minnesota, and one was from Pine Ridge in South Dakota. So it's a very important part of American culture and society and our history. And there's a kind of complex relationship of 21st century Americans to our native past. And this is one of those books that sort of brings you to a place where you've maybe not been before. Maybe you have been. This is set in a real place, Spokane Indian Reservation in Eastern Washington. I mean, you can go on Google Maps, you just look it up, Wellapint. It's a real town. You can go there. It's just a little wide spot in the middle of Spokane Reservation in Washington State. And Reardon, where he goes to high school, real place. It's just about 20 miles from Wellapint, where Arnold's from. So it's one of those books that, I'll put it down now. I like having it next to me, but I'm getting tired of holding it. One of those books that, like all good literature, or narrative literature, story, it gets us out of our own experience, right? Because for the most part, if you're like me, your life is office, home, travel, family. Some of you may travel more than others, and work, right? We have fairly narrow, that's the nature of human life, unless we are a travel writer, or spend your time moving from place to place, like work for the UN or something. But most of us have a fairly limited reality. We've got our friends, we've got our people we hang out with, and then how do you know anything about somebody from Bangladesh or Soviet Union, which doesn't exist anymore, Ukraine, Belarus, just anybody, somebody Finnish, anybody Finnish? I don't know. Get to New Zealand, and when we do like go, out of our own experience, we tend to do it as tourists. Middle-class Americans tend to be, we want to go places, but that orientation tends to be like, well, let's go consume something, let's go have an experience somewhere. And now for Christian families, a lot of people go to places to serve, which I think is a nice idea, as long as the idea of service comes as a subordinate. You're subordinate to the people you are serving, right? Hands and feet. And you're not there to like bring your superiority, right? To help because I'm more privileged than you. Anyway, so the fact is we don't do a lot of, travel in the true sense. And that is why books are magic. They can take us places, wherever you want to go. Who do you want to meet? Right? What kind of person's life do you want to know about? It's as simple as cracking open a book. And this is, for me, a long ways from home. I grew up on a farm in southern Iowa, right? Went to small Christian schools. And I'm trying to think. I was on Pine Ridge Reservation once as a part of a Northwestern group. But my experience with Native Americans is really limited. But I read a great deal, actually, and I've taught extensively about. There's a novelist named Louise Erdrich I've written about her, and it's really eye-opening. So anyway, I wanted to bring you to Spokane Reservation in eastern Washington, a few decades ago. Because this guy, Sherman Alexie, you may know this already, if you use the internet at all, right? Alexie, that's his deal, right? This is fiction, but it's really heavily influenced by Alexie's biography. Okay, so he grew up in eastern Washington. He is from the Spokane Reservation. He grew up in Willapa. He transferred to Reardon High School. He played basketball. All that stuff is out of Alexie's life. So when he talks about the book, he's like, yeah, it's, and you can find this, he's a pretty famous writer, actually. He's talked a lot about the book. So yeah, it's the real deal. And the students I've had from reservation, reservation life differs, right? It's not all one thing, right? But just in terms of the Native American experience in the late 20th, early 21st century, it rings true. So the book may be raw, it may be uncomfortable even in parts. I know some students over the years have been a little bit like, whoa, this is like really brutally honest about what it's like to be in the way these kids talk and sort of viciousness. And it's, anyway, so the point I'm making is one of the good things about a literature class, or you don't need class, you pick up a book and you can go someplace really important. And, I was thinking about this with respect to COVID, but just anything in life, right? If your own reality isn't too hopping, right? During COVID, we're all stuck home, and, and life has a way of, being dull sometimes. And, when you live up north, you have winter. Winter is the best excuse to read. You just grab something and go there. And I know, based on the, the comments that y'all made about video games, and I asked that on purpose because, my boys are big gamers. They love, my son actually played, what's it called? Overwatch. It's a video game. It's really popular. We have a team on campus. So this whole thing is like, oh, don't play video games, don't watch movies, right? It's like, well, we give scholarships now for our esports athletes. So it's just wild how, and I don't think it's a bad thing, right? Because you might think, oh, a literature professor doesn't like media and so forth. It's much more complex than that. I teach film too. I love film. I think visual art is, visual art is arguably older and, as Arnold says, more universal than text. Text is privilege, right? Text is education. Text is language. Text is literacy. My goodness, right? And you think of the privilege you have just for being literate. And in the Christian tradition, that's so interesting too, right? Because, the vast number of Christians were not literate, right? So the apostles, and then, vast numbers of the early church, which accounts for all the iconography, the statuary, the painting, story via picture, because we can't read. And then this amazing transformation in the Gutenberg Bible, the printing press, literacy. And it's still only a very narrow part of the population, but the Protestant Reformation opens up the knowledge of God to everybody who can read, and not just Latin, right? You can read it in German now, or Spanish, or English. So, it's a simple story, right? This kid who draws cartoons, but it's there's some really valuable themes inside it. So we're off to the res, and with all of its characteristics, right? And some of them are not good, the alcoholism especially, poverty. But there's some really admirable things. His parents, his friendships, the family bonds that exist despite all the hardships. So I hope you're finding it, equal parts up and down, I guess, for lack of a better term, right? That there are some really bleak, right, some really pretty awful scenes and pretty hard things that he has to deal with, but there's also enough to keep him going. So I don't want to go on and on, but I just wanted to stop in and say a few things about the book generally. And I hope you're enjoying the characters. I mean, so much that it's important about literary work is based on character. And it's pretty simple, right? You probably remember this from high school or wherever. When we study literature, we're really talking about just a handful of things. And one is plot, story, narrative, whatever you want to call it. I mean, not all books are plotted in the same way, certainly, and some aren't really plotted at all. They're just fragmentary, and that's an interesting thing to read. But in this case, we have a pretty straightforward plot, right? It's a growing up book, a book about growing up, a book about, it's just a year, but child becomes, adult, I mean, roughly. But it's a pretty straightforward plot. So we talk a lot about that, the story itself, and then we talk about character. Who are the people inside the story? And those two are, you can spend many lifetimes on those. There's setting, as it's sometimes conceived of, takes place at a certain time and place. I mean, that's important. And it depends, but it's a short summer class too. I try to, because it's such a big thing, it's kind of reconnecting you with literature, no matter what your major is. I wish I had more time for poetry. Or maybe we could read a few plays, look at some short stories. But with our brief time, we'll try to, we'll stick to these short novels. Because that's really the point, reconnecting you with literature if it's been a while. Get you to read more after class. And then I mentioned in the forum too, somebody said reading to their children, and it's like, yeah, when I teach the class, I talk a lot about that. Because I started teaching long before I had kids, and then I had little kids, and I would read to them, and now they're grown and reading on their own. And I really find that that transmission of literacy, right? That thing that we're calling church history and so forth. That's one of the definitions of the humanities, of humanity. And especially coming out of, Protestant tradition. I don't know, Northwestern draws all kinds of Christians, right? So, and there are, plenty of students here who are struggling with the faith and trying to think their way through it. And it's a good time of life to do that in a safe place. Giving the next generation tools the language tools to help, educated people understand their faith is a really important thing. Life's busy and it's full of distractions, and that's why higher education is such a privilege and it's a little place to contemplate, to sort of stop with all of this reality. Got to get groceries, I got to get my work done, I got to worry, take care of people. Just read for a little bit each day. It's really a good therapeutic thing to do. And there's so much of this right online. I confess I was alive before the internet, right? I'm an old guy, but there's so much entertaining, so much valuable, and reading to do too. Read, and I love to listen to books too, audiobooks. There's something about, a comfortable chair and a story. And it can be abused like anything, right? There's as much garbage in books as there is online or on TV or in the movies, right? Just trash fiction, it's everywhere. And I don't want to be so judgmental. People need a break. They need to, indulge in a good, action, adventure, Western, whatever you need. But life is, distracting and busy, and the comfort of a good book that helps you think about your life and helps you understand the hard questions and gets you out of, some self-knowledge, right? But also gets you out of your own skin, shoes, for all kinds of reasons. That's a really uniquely human thing. So literacy, it gives us not only tools, okay, I can read, okay, but practically, all sorts of skill and work and job, blah, blah, blah. But it gives you a different orientation toward the world, which might, there's all this debate about animals' communication, and it's all very interesting. I mean, my dog is really smart, I think, but he hasn't talked to me yet. I think he wants to. I mean, he's a good dog, and I talk to him. I talk to him a lot, but he does not speak, at least not in English. But there's all this debate, right, about dolphins and whatnot talking to each other. We know that humans do. And when you think about that capacity, right, our ability to use language, we have now taken reality and turned it into words. Words aren't real reality. They're real words, but it's not reality. So we have taken the real world and turned it into a set of symbols. And we can use that to widen our reality. I'm just making the point, right? That we say, oh, you should get in somebody else's shoes. You should walk a mile in their shoes. And, we need to understand the other people. And all that's true, but it becomes so cliched, right? It's like, oh, yeah, well, I get that. The empathy and all that. But it's like, think about it. Language, by virtue of its representation, can create in you the experience of another. And that seems to me to be a pretty significant thing for humans to do. So, yeah, enjoy it. I'm kind of, rambling here, but the real essence of my remarks is to help you value imaginative fiction that pushes you to understand other people. All right, I think I'll stop rambling there. Hope you love these characters as much as I do. You know, every one of them, from Roger to Gordy to Penelope, they're just, gosh, they're just kids you meet in high school. I don't know, such truth here. And Mr. P and grandmother, I don't know who I like best. I have a lot of affection for Eugene, I think, because, I mean, I grew up with some people who were pretty limited in their opportunities, and sort of breaks your heart. Anyway, you enjoy these characters and the story. If you finished it already, that's great. It was a fast read. I know that. I probably have some more to say. Maybe I'll try to make another little short video before Sunday night so that you can use my comments when you're writing. Anyway, there's a new discussion forum. Drop in if you want to share your views on some of this I've been rambling about. Otherwise, have a good weekend or the rest of the week, and I'll make another one soon. Bye-bye.